We have an alternative option for how to approach shading in this video. So I'm just going to start by describing what's going on, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Vine charcoal because there are some things that need to be said about it as a material. So what I'm doing here is starting off with Vine charcoal, but instead of doing a contour drawing first and a line drawing first, I'm looking at what the big shapes are. I'm measuring, but I'm I'm blocking in my big shapes. And so what this does is it decreases my accuracy, even though I'm measuring and everything. It's more likely, you're more likely to make a mistake here. But you're also more likely to move through the beginning of the drawing way quicker. And this little section here, in real time, it takes me about 9 minutes to get it all done. And then I move on to the pencils. But this approach, like there's three basic approaches that we would normally talk about. One is you do contour drawing first, and then you fill in your big values with the vine. The second one is you take vine charcoal and you cover the entire page with it, and then you erase out your image and build it up from there. And that's really fast too, but the problem is with that approach that the lighter areas, they get dusted with charcoal and sometimes you can't get it light enough. So everything in your drawing gets a little bit too dark. And I found that approach really useful when I first started drawing. So it's not that I would encourage you not to try that. I think you should. But for the purposes of a demonstration, I just don't think it would make as good a video. So I can describe that to you just as well as show it to you. But this approach allows you to have all the advantages of that, toning the whole page and then working your way out without, you have all the advantages and none of the problems that come with it. Like, I know that the lightest light in my drawing is the table, so there's really no reason for me to put a ton of charcoal, the same amount of charcoal on the table that I would put on the fabric where I know it's going to be really dark. And like I said, it's a little bit less accurate. And when I'm looking at the drawing now, the length of that face in the sculpture head is just laughable. But personally, that's something that I've always had a problem with. Whenever I draw faces, I always have a tendency to stretch them out. So here I am blocking in these big shapes, thinking that I've got it right. And I realize not long from now that I have some major proportion problems in the face. But anyway, one of the other things that I've found that's really interesting about this approach is it starts you off with a level of energy that is really appealing in drawing terms. Like there's nothing boring, even if the drawing isn't very good, which in this case it's not the best drawing I'm capable of making for sure, um, but the drawing is like, it's never uninteresting. The way that the original values get blocked in is so energized and so just visually varied that there's no real, you're never going to have a boring drawing if you start it this way. And part of that lack of boringness might be your constant struggle to fix the problems that you caused at the beginning. But it's ultimately this is a personal preference kind of thing. So you can see that I've ditched the vine charcoal and I've picked up the pencils, and I'm just going and finding my deepest darks, working them up. I focused on that box that the bus sits on, and since I got the coconut surrounded, I just figured I would take a few minutes and indulge in drawing that. Like that was the impetus for me for making the drawing, was that broken part of the coconut. It just looked really cool, and I rotated it so the lighting was perfect, and that cast shadow was casting on the back wall, and I could just go in there and just pull all that information out. It was really easy to draw. I know that the box that the head sits on looks like the angles are a little bit off, but one of the things you got to remember when you're looking at drawing videos is that there's always distortion from the angle. Like the camera is not perpendicular to the drawing plane here. It's it's at a significant angle, so the right hand side of the drawing is further away than the left, and the drawing is angled up a little bit and away from us because it's on an easel. But I can't really make good drawings laying flat, uh, so that's what's going on there. But so you can see me making some adjustments to the proportions in the face. I mean, it's a little embarrassing that I was that far off. I mean, I had the eyebrows, a good inch and a half too high, which is kind of unforgivable. But anyway, it really doesn't matter because part of the drawing process is making a mess and cleaning it up, right? I mean, some of you guys out there are just going to get everything right away, and you're just someone who's going to do that. I've never been someone who gets things right away. I always have to work things up 2 or 3 times to really get them right. And eventually this thing gets pretty solid. But okay, so now let's talk about Vine charcoal. So a lot of people, when they first start drawing with Vine charcoal, they absolutely hate it. And there are good reasons to hate it. It's very messy. It comes in either chunks, long cylinders, or these really thin little sticks. The only thing that the sticks are good for is putting in a plastic bag and grinding into powder. And then you have this charcoal powder that you can dust over your paper and buff with a paper towel. That can be really interesting if you need a little more control and you want really smooth transitions and values. But the Vine charcoal, it's just too soft for those sticks. So if you're in the class and you end up buying a bunch of these things, just get, if you're going to try and draw with them, just get ready for them to be relatively useless. But the piece that you saw me use was a chunk that was about a half an inch thick. It was about 6 inches long. That's the biggest chunk of charcoal I've ever owned personally. And I dropped it one time and it broke in half. So you're seeing the broken half. But I like a big piece of Vine charcoal because it reminds me of the most important attribute that Vine charcoal has, is that, and remember this is super important, Vine charcoal is a general tool for general information. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you can get any level of detail out of Vine charcoal. I use it to work out my contour lines, or in this case, skip the contour lines and just block in with my big shapes. And then if I'm really sort of going after the planar structure in a drawing, I'll use the Vine charcoal to start an exploration of the planes. And then as soon as I'm happy with the layout and what's going on, I'll go straight into the drawing pencils, the charcoal pencils, and the Vine charcoal really will not make an appearance unless I need to make a big correction in the drawing, which you did see me do with the face. I erased some things and I redrew with the Vine charcoal, and that's pretty normal. So what I recommend you do when you go shopping for Vine charcoal is try and find, it's also called willow charcoal depending on the brand or whatever when you're at the store, but try and find a piece that's kind of, the best description is cigar shaped. That's going to be what you want. There's another kind of charcoal that might get mixed in when you're looking, and that will be something called compressed charcoal. Compressed charcoal is a chunk of charcoal that's the same stuff that's in your pencils. And The only scenario I've seen where drawing with compressed charcoal has worked for me is when I'm drawing on newsprint or some kind of a surface where you get a lot of release and it's easy to erase. Compressed charcoal is mixed with clay. It's very, very sticky. And it's more than likely just going to go too dark too fast. So starting with vine charcoal, remember vine charcoal doesn't have anything mixed into it. It doesn't have a binder. So it doesn't really stick. So when you go to erase it, you can erase it almost 100%. And depending on the paper, there are some papers that will release 100%. So that's not really a bad thing at all. But there are papers that vine charcoal will stick to better than others. This one, you can see there are places where I'm trying to erase some of the initial vine charcoal lines in the face, and I'm kind of unable to. The forehead is a great example. There's lines that I probably wouldn't have wanted there, but they complicate the surface, and I don't really mind them. The face's structure and lighting and everything is clear enough, so it's not really a huge problem. But as the drawing progresses here, you can see that I spend a few minutes drawing on one aspect of the drawing, and then I'll go into the like the jawline or that part of the neck, and then I'll bounce back and forth to the fabric, because one of the things I want to do is I don't want to develop my darks to the point where I make a mistake by going too dark too fast. I want to build up my dark slowly. So I want to establish where I know my deepest darks are, and I know where they are. They're behind the pomegranate, behind the box on the right, underneath. Those are my darkest darks. I can establish those and then work my way out from there and just let things get lighter. But I just don't want to do it too fast. It's always a mistake when you're shading to go too quickly. So just take your time. And when your brain starts to need a reset and you get bored with a certain passage, just go back to building your darks up. And that's a rhythm that works for me. One of the things that you're doing while you're drawing, as a student of drawing, whether you're an artist that you want to be for the rest of your life, or you're just drawing because it's better than taking art appreciation, one of the things that you're doing by studying drawing in some depth is you're using the experience of drawing to just sort of connect with your own brain and figure out how it works. And if you can find a way through drawing to access the way your brain works, you're going to be able to teach yourself the things you need to learn in art and drawing and painting and sculpture and whatever you want, but also just in your life. And that's one of the reasons why drawing used to be a standard part of a sort of a general education. And it isn't so much anymore, but that's one of the things that I like to talk about. It's certainly a pursuit that will help you figure out how you learn, because you can take all the classes you want, and you can go to whatever school and whatever program, but the learning that you're going to do in your life is largely going to be stuff that you teach yourself. So if you don't get in touch with how you learn, all the classes in the world aren't going to help you. I mean, most of the classes you take as a college student, you forget most of the information. And what do you remember? Mostly just the things you were interested in, the things that you focused on and taught yourself. So I like to think about drawing that way. And every time I draw, I think about what am I learning and what am I trying to teach myself, and what can I gain from this particular experience. So I think that was most of the main ideas that I wanted to talk about. I think the last thing I'll talk about before I'll sign off and just let the drawing take you guys out is, in this video and in the other video, I have a full piece of paper, and you can see on the bottom right and on the right hand side, I have sort of boxed the image off. The reason that I did that is because I'm drawing in front of a camera, and I have to know where my limits are, and my drawing ended up being a little bit smaller. But those of you who are in the class, you have a full piece of paper. I want you to use the whole thing. If you need a border, then just, mark off a 1 inch border around the paper. But the idea is that you're using the whole page. When you're having trouble with something, don't just make it smaller, because then you don't have to deal with the problem. Um, Deal with the entire page. Make sure your lighting is good. Just take your time and build these things up. But I boxed off my image to stay on camera, so that I wasn't doing anything that was gonna waste my time and go off camera, just to keep drawing. So with that, I'm gonna leave you with the drawing.